You found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we go back to ransomware school. Prasanna, my co-author, Dr. Mike Saylor, and I break down what the CryptoLocker virus was, why it mattered, and how it changed the ransomware game for everybody, good guys and bad guys. Mike breaks down how encryption actually works, why the bad guys switched to public-private key encryption, and how the CryptoLocker virus taught criminals what not to do when building a ransomware business. Well, we also cover botnets, Operation Tovar, Bitcoin, and today's double extortion attacks. There's a lot of info in this episode, so buckle up. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup. I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years, ever since I had to tell my boss that there were no backups of the production database that we just lost. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Welcome to the Backup Wrap-Up. I'm your host, W. Curtis Preston, a.k.a. Mr. Backup, and I have with me the guy that was completely not helpful for this morning's events, Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going? But you weren't there for me.
In fairness, I did not know what happened this morning until about 35 seconds ago, actually 36 seconds ago, so I think that is a perfectly legitimate excuse.
Yeah, whatever. I was going through some hard stuff, man, and you weren't there for me. I'm just saying. But anyway, so Prasanna, welcome, of course, to the podcast. And we, of course, have once again with us Dr. Mike Saylor, all the way from the great Republic of Texas. How's it going, Mike?
It's going well, guys. Thanks for having me again.
Have I never noticed this? You've got some kind of game thing behind you.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple of those mini arcades with 5 to 500 different types of games on them. Yeah.
Really? 100 years ago, I remember I didn't last. The last like arcade game I remember playing like that was actually what was the one with the knight? You remember the first
Joust.
one that had like, yeah, Joust. Yeah, I remember being horribly awful at Joust.
As soon as you started saying, a long time ago, I had this game, that's the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah. I had Joust, but the last game I remember being any good at was like Miss Pac-Man, right? Like Asteroids and Miss Pac-Man and that era, which is
Galaga.
Mm-hmm.
Galaga, yeah. So we're old, is all I'm really saying.
This one has Galaga on it.
Yeah. All right. At some point, I got to come
Centipede.
over there. Oh, Centipede.
Nice.
Yeah, I remember Centipede. But all the people listening, they're like, whatever, man. Like these old farts. Just tell me about ransomware. So we're talking about history, though, in this episode. We're going back, back in the day, as I like to do. When Mike, when you and I wrote the book, like they sort of like poo-pooed on the history part. They were like, we don't want to spend a lot of time on the history, right? You remember that?
Good stuff.
But I think there definitely is value in like going back a little bit in time to understand how we got here, right? That there was a time when ransomware wasn't what it is. There's like 3 sort of generations of ransomware. There's the first one, which a lot of it was like either like the claim that, when you got the message, it was almost like it was like a fake message that you wanted them to believe the hacker wanted you to believe that you were actually attacked by ransomware, when in reality, nothing had actually happened to you. And we still see this today, at least I still see it today, with messages on like my phone. Right? You go to the wrong website and you'll get this thing of like, your phone has been taken. Yeah, your phone has been taken over. We know all your things and give us all your money, or we're going to do the thing, and all you have to do is like close the browser, right?
For a period of time, those were categorized as scareware.
Yeah, Scareware, right? Yeah, yeah. But I mean, that was so. There was that, and there was also you mentioned, in our pre-call, you mentioned that there was some stuff that was kind of easy to like decrypt. Would that be right?
Yeah, it wasn't asymmetric encryption that we think of today. It was more of a decoder ring type of encryption, or a cipher.
It was
whatever was quickest and easiest to implement, I'm guessing.
Yep. Low overhead, high speed, low drag.
So you threw out a couple of terms there. Let's start with the cipher concept. What are we talking about there?
Well, cipher would be similar to like your decoder ring. The number 1 equals the letter A.
Right.
So that's a cipher. It's a 1-to-1 match, and that's how a decoder ring works. You turn your decoder ring until this lines up with that, and there's your letter or your number, and that's how initial ransom type encryption happened. And it wasn't even ransom, and just encryption in general from malware perspective was typically cipher driven.
Right. And then there was the second thing that you talked about. Well, actually, it was the first thing, but I'm going to put it as the second thing, which is you said it wasn't asymmetric encryption, which this gives us an opportunity, I think, to discuss the difference between symmetric and asymmetric encryption.
So symmetric means that the keys are the same. So if I encrypt something and send it to you, you already have it's your encryption key. Well, we all share the same key. It's public key encryption. So everybody has the same key. The only way to maintain integrity and confidentiality is to make sure nobody else that has that, nobody has the key that shouldn't. And so if one of us left the group and we want to maintain confidentiality and integrity, we've got to regenerate a key for us to share, right? It's kind of like changing the key to your house. When you buy a new home, you want to change all the locks because you don't know who kept the key from the prior group.
So when you change the key with symmetric encryption, do you then have to like re-encrypt the data?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So, and the real problem, I think, with symmetric encryption would be basically communicate. Like if I want to send you something over email, right, and I want to encrypt it, well, how do I get you the key? That's a real problem there.
Don't email it. Send it with the email. No.
I'll send it via SMS because that's more secure.
Well, it would be better. So we would consider that an out-of-band communication. So you would use a different account or a different method like SMS, or we would meet in person, or I would stick it to the bottom of a park bench, or things like that.
Yeah, like I've seen in the spy movies.
Right.
Prasanna, you got anything to jump in there?
I was going to ask about, Curtis, I think you kind of touched on it. So symmetric encryption, when you rotate the key or change the key, right? Everything moving forward would be encrypted using the new key, which means that previous person, in your example, Mike, who left the group, would no longer be able to decode the new data because they don't have access to the key. And if they wanted to ensure that the person who left the group also doesn't have access to the old data, then they would also have to re-encrypt or decrypt the data first and then re-encrypt using the new key, correct?
Correct. And that is even though it's a difficult math problem, it's a lot less difficult than asymmetric encryption math problems.
Gotcha. It's because it's a matter of like, you just need to know the key, right?
It's easier to figure out one key than it is the combination of two keys.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, good. So, all right. So let's talk about what's next to the asymmetric encryption.
So asymmetric means the two different halves are different, right? So, you've got a square on one side and a circle on the other. That's asymmetric. And essentially, the other term for that is public-private key encryption. So I encrypt something with your public key or your public key and my private key. And then when you get it, you decrypt it with my public key and your private key. And so as long as our private keys are kept safe, that communication can be relied upon as far as integrity and confidentiality. But if I can steal your private key, then I can decrypt everything that Mike sends to Curtis. If your private key is compromised, I can decrypt that. Well, with regards to ransomware, the victim is the public key. So I've deployed ransomware in your environment. I put the public key in that environment, or I create a public key, and then the private key is held on the command and control server by the bad guys. And this goes back to early days of ransomware and why you had to pay the ransom within a certain period of time, because that private key lived on a server that was being rented, a botnet, for that period of time. So after 72 hours is up, the botnet goes away, and so does that private key that would be needed to decrypt your stuff.
And if you lost access to the private key, you could never decrypt that data, right? That's sort of the strength of the asymmetric encryption, correct?
I wouldn't say never, but yeah, it's very difficult to crack, because for the most part, being human, we're going to create, and it does depend on the tool you use to create your keys. A lot of times these days, it's all random stuff, like move your mouse around and do this, that, and the other until the light turns green, and then we've created your key. But some people create their keys based on kind of their approach to passwords. So birthdays and peoples and dogs and college football teams and that kind of thing. And so when we go about trying to crack encryption, there are kind of brute force methods, along with like true math hacking approaches to cracking passwords or keys. But yeah, there's a couple of different things to think about, and a lot of those are unknown. So if you created your key and I don't know what you used to create it, then yeah, it's a lot more difficult for me as far as determining my approach to cracking your encryption. But if I did know what you used, then I could focus on those type of tactics.
Right. Interesting, because I'll just say for the record, even though I understand everything you just said, and I probably could have given the exact same description or definition that you just gave, I have no idea how that works. Like, just like that's in terms of like underneath, right? The actual coding part, right? Why did switching to private public key help make ransomware more prevalent,
resilient,
or resilient? Yeah. Oh, maybe you already answered this, that basically the difficulty of guessing two keys is harder than guessing one key.
Well, it's the value of the ransom, right? So if I'm going to hold you ransom and there's a high likelihood that you're not going to be able to recover from it, then I'm more likely to get paid. So if I can make that encryption foolproof, or at least very difficult for you to figure out within the period of time that I think it, before it starts to hurt you as a business or a person, you're more likely to pay the ransom. So by increasing my encryption strength, by moving to asymmetric encryption, the likelihood of you being able to recover without paying me goes down.
Gotcha.
And Mike, even with the asymmetric encryption, I think I had read articles where some of the ransomware actors might have used the same private key over multiple different victims. And so like the FBI or any of these other organizations were able to help other victims, even though by just gaining access to that private key. Is that right?
And there's there's an enhancement to that, in that there are some bad guys or even some good guys that put the effort into decrypting things on their own. And so whether the FBI was able to get the key from a prior victim to help future victims, or it was these bad actors or, good actors, white hats or gray hats, that cracked the password on their own and then shared it. Because one of the things that we saw early on in the ransomware game was that there was competition for ransomware. And so you might have one ransomware actor attacking the the victims that another ransomware actor wanted to attack, or feeling like they're intruding on their business. And so one ransomware threat actor may crack the keys or provide a decryptor for the other ransomware. And this actually happened. There was a website put up that said, if you're encrypted by, X ransomware gang, put your files here and we'll decrypt them for free.
That's
no honor among thieves.
That's right.
I had no idea that basically the competitors trying to hurt their competitors. That's crazy, actually, that they would do that. Now,
drug dealers. This is my corner.
Yeah, it's my corner. I get it. So what about so as we move forward in time, what was CryptoLocker? When I say was, it's still around, right? But how, in terms of the story, what role did CryptoLocker play?
Well, I think it was one of those, somebody had to be first at trying to formalize the ransomware business. So there was a lot that both victims and bad guys learned from CryptoLocker. So CryptoLocker reinforced the need to be more diligent with. So the CryptoLocker taught us a lot from a victim perspective because it made us more diligent with the emails that we get. A lot of CryptoLocker came in fake FedEx emails about a package or a delivery. So that really kicked off the start of phishing training. And making sure that we're clicking on stuff that we expected and reporting things that looked suspicious. And then on the threat actor side, it really taught the bad guys how not to build a criminal business because these guys were not very well organized. They didn't cover their tracks. They weren't doing the 3 and 4 layers of anonymity that we see today. They simply just rented a botnet. They developed some ransomware that did. Even though it had asymmetric encryption, they did not protect their keys very well, which is, and what I mean by that is eventually when law enforcement started going after these guys, the capture of their keys was fairly quick. They didn't hide them. They weren't on a USB, underneath a floorboard or anything. And so that their organization fell apart within like a year or so.
Do you know if there were arrests made?
Oh, there were a lot of arrests made. I'm trying to remember the name of the law enforcement campaign. I think, Curtis, I think you put it in the notes earlier, but it's like Tovar or something like that. Yeah. Operation Tovar. So yeah, there was an international task force that went after these guys. And it was about a year later that CryptoLocker as an organization went down. That the ransomware became a kind of a starting point for a lot of other ransomware campaigns. Bad guys are lazy. If I can take what you've built and just modify it as a kind of a framework. And so that's pretty common. There's a couple of good graphics out there that show you how different ransomware over time branched off into these different variants. And CryptoLocker was one of those first that branched off into several.
So given that it was sort of one of the first, right, that changed ransomware and the business, how much money, like what was sort of the amount of ransom that they were able to steal from their victims? Because I'm sure back then it was like a very different magnitude than it is today, just given how prevalent ransomware is. So,
well, and they could have done more, but similar to normal approaches to business, you've got to look at, the feasibility. Who's your customer? What's the likelihood of payment or success?
Which is so funny when you talk about like a criminal organization.
Well, they had to think about this. So if they ransom your stuff and they ask for $1 million, what's the likelihood that they're going to get paid? Especially, back in the day, a lot of the infections were on individual devices. It wasn't like a whole environment. And so the value of an individual device versus crippling a whole company, right? So CryptoLocker's ransom was relatively small. a couple $100, maybe I think up to 500. And that correlated well with the value of Bitcoin at the time. And so one of the things that they did think about as far as anonymity goes is how do we get paid without people knowing who they're paying? And so that's when, the advent of cryptocurrencies kind of kicked some of this off. But Bitcoin back in the day, was a couple $100 a Bitcoin, maybe close to 300. And so a ransom for $300 or $500, anybody could go get one Bitcoin, or it would be relatively easy to get. And that's interesting too, because over time, as the ransom started to go up, people had to ask for help, because I don't know if you know this, but as individuals, you can only get 2 Bitcoin like maybe every couple of weeks. So if you get now Bitcoin's a lot more valuable today, but let's say back in the day, if someone asked you for 4 Bitcoin, regardless of the cost, just 4 Bitcoin, you and I could not do that within 72 hours. Mm. Like I could go get 2, and then I'd have to call a friend and say, hey, I need you to go get 2. And then, all right, where do we go? Well, it's usually not a good part of town. It's a bar somewhere that has a Bitcoin machine on the counter next to the bathroom. And that's how they do drug transactions these days. But yeah, there's a whole logistics behind and marketing and sales strategy behind ransomware.
Fascinating. So if CryptoLocker was, like you said, it was the first, but then they shut down the organization, it sounds like the main role that it's played here in the history is that we can look, or the bad guys were able to look at that and said, okay, there's what not to do. let's do something slightly different than that. Let's take what we can do. Let's take the crypto, part of it, right? So that we can get paid anonymously, semi-anonymously. And let's do that, the asymmetric encryption. But be better at hiding our secrets as we're part of it. Does that sound about right?
It is, and then just add to that the integration of the botnet. So again, bad guys learn some things here too. Utilizing the botnet, that is a layer in your anonymity and definitely a component for your the management or the command and control of your ransomware. But there was some lessons learned there about how best to do that and who to work with. Like Zeus, the Zeus botnet is who CryptoLocker used, and they became pretty widely used after this. They were common, but they kind of made a name for themselves as a platform from which you can start to do these ransomware attacks. And they started to improve their service and their support for those types of attacks after this one.
Feature requests.
Yep.
So again, for those that are, this is definitely a foundational episode. Do you want to discuss what a botnet is and, how that, well, there you go.
Sure. So a botnet is a network of bots, and a bot is short for robot. And a robot is a computer that you and I use, or maybe it's a company or an entire school district. It's somebody else's computer that bad guys have compromised and added it to their network of other compromised computers. It's essentially a peer-to-peer network of zombies, if you will, that come to life whenever bad guys rent them out to other threat actors. And so, I may have
like a puppeteer.
I may have 1 million compromised computers around the world, and Curtis calls and says, "Hey, I need 10,000 computers for this thing." It could be distributed computing to crack passwords. And by the way, when I have this botnet developed, I inventory all of my bots, so I know the type of computer, memory, processor, all those things, and so I can actually segment or virtualize parts of that botnet based on my client's requirements. So if I need 10,000 machines with 8 cores or more, as far as processing goes, and how much memory total across all this distributed network, then I can build that and rent it by the hour by the day, week, month, to whoever needs it for whatever reason. And so for a while, especially early on, the term for that would be a botnet herder. So I'm a bot herder. So kind of a shepherd of bots. That's kind of and people in the industry do the same thing you just did. It's kind of, they laugh at it and like nobody says that. But the textbooks did. They called them bot herders. And there's a fascinating paper, and I'm trying. It's called The Dark Visitor. It's out on the internet. It's a declassified military report on the Chinese Red Honker Army, and that was the kind of the first nation state white paper written by the military on the Chinese capabilities for cyber espionage and that kind of stuff. And in that paper, they call bots meat chickens or meteor chickens. So a compromised. So that's how it translates.
Because it was written in Chinese.
Right.
Okay.
That's how it translates. It translates into a meteor chicken. So a compromised computer that's part of a bot is a meteor chicken.
That's pretty funny. So at the beginning of this episode, I mentioned that there were sort of three phases. We've discussed the evolution from that very beginning of sort of like Scareware up to asymmetric encryption with CryptoLocker and other lots of copycats, since then. And we had this giant proliferation of what I'm going to now call traditional ransomware. But what has happened is, in the last several years, is that as people like me have helped random people, have better backups and be able to recover from a ransomware attack via a restore, they're like, well, we got to do something else. And they added this concept of exfiltration, right? And then double extortion. So they're stealing your data, and then they're like, well, if you don't, you may be able to restore your data, but if you don't give us this money, then we're going to reveal your secrets, which may be intellectual property, or it may be information that you don't want out there. Does that sound about right?
It does. And there's even alternative extortion. Even more recently, bad guys are going after the people whose data they took from you. So that could be a client, it could be a student, and they're saying, "Hey, the company you did business with, or your kid goes to school with, isn't paying us. But if you pay me, or maybe you need to tell them to pay us, then we won't release your information to the public."
Oof.
So Prasanna, this is a little reminiscent of what happened with LastPass. Do you remember what happened there?
Yeah. So the bad actors broke into LastPass, stole the encrypted vaults. And then they were starting to crack the vaults because they realized people stored their cryptocurrency key, right, their passphrase, in their vaults. And so they were then going after them in order to drain people's wallets.
Yeah. It's kind of like that. Different, but kind of, the idea of going after...
They go after the victim.
Yeah, going after the victim, yeah. I do want to have a moment of silence for the guy that lost his hard drive with the crypto key in the dump that he's now officially given up. I don't know if you saw that in the last week or so. That guy has officially given up his search for the hard drive with his crypto key. For the want of a backup. Yeah, it was a lot of money. Worst throwaway ever. He threw it away, right?
Yep. He threw it away. So here's a question. Since those are now gone and not recoverable, does that mean those Bitcoins just sort of linger forever?
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
He would have to relinquish them. And if I was him, I would not. Because you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like having gold stored in Mount Doom, right? From Lord of the Rings. Yeah, like
you
know it's there, but nobody's going to ever be able to get it.
Have you guys ever watched Honest Trailers?
Oh yes, I love the honest trailers. Yeah,
He just did one this last week on Lord of the Rings.
Oh, did he?
That's good.
I another series I like is How It Should Have Ended. I don't know if you've seen that series. So
No.
it's a whole series where they take the ending of movies and then they're like, well, this is how this should have ended. And the only one I remember, and it was a Star Trek. It was one of the newer Star Trek movies, and they get sucked into like a black hole in the movie, and I don't remember how they get out of the black hole, but in the How It Should Have Ended, the first of the new Star Treks. So they picked on this movie a lot, that there were all these lens flares everywhere on the ship, and so the way that How It Should Have Ended is, instead of getting sucked into the black hole, somebody said, I know, shut off the lens flare generator. And they did that, and then they were able to escape the black hole. But yeah, I've seen the honest trailers. I like that bit a lot. All right, I think we've covered some basics of ransomware. Don't do ransomware, kids. I don't know what to tell you there. All right, thanks everybody for joining. Prasanna, thanks for joining.
It was good to understand the history. So,
yeah,
and I appreciate the history from old people. So,
yeah, thanks, Mike, for being another old people.
Sure.
All right, that is a wrap.